Hey, welcome to episode 134 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined by Tettles and Trell, and our special guest this week, Trell, your raid leader of the Nascent Guild, Guild Nascent, Treefee. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Can we get a pronunciation check on that word?
Treefee or Nascent? Nascent?
The guild name.
Oh. Yeah, what is it? What is Treefee?
I think we call it Nascent.
Nascent?
Okay. Nascent.
Okay. I'm going to go over to Google.
I was pronouncing it wrong, but also Dratus
I also pronounced it wrong for the first 6 months I was in the guild, and luckily I don't think I ever said it out loud.
Shit, I've already messed up.
Okay, hang on.
Our guild leader's in the chat. He could probably inform us.
I will press the play button on Google pronunciations right now, and we'll see what that thinks. The stream will hear.
Nascent.
It says it my way. It says nascent.
Well, that's.
But I mean, you guys, you have artistic license. You so the guild Nascent, which is somewhat similar to the English word nascent, but is different. Is differently pronounced.
Correct.
One of America's and the world's best guilds that raids with a couple of different conditions, fairly short hours and multiple raid teams as well, which are, I think, two very interesting things that we'll talk a lot about this show. But just real quick, what's the top level summary of what your guild's all about?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm the raid leader of Nascent. I joined back in HFC. I measure my life by WoW raid tiers. I don't know how many years ago that was, but that's when I joined. A long time, something like that. I think the guild was formed earlier in WoD, maybe Highmall, Blackrock Foundry or something. So I joined at the end of that expansion. Been there ever since. I've been playing Hunter and Shadow Priest for many, many years. And then just recently this tier, I raid lead from outside of the raid, 21st man, I suppose. And yeah, we have a 9-hour team and an 8-hour team. So we are team 9 technically in Nascent. We raid 3 nights a week, 3 hours each night. And then our 2-night team raids 8 hours total a week. 2 completely independent teams. They have completely different leadership, officers, completely different raiding roster. We've just been around a long time, and we have a big community. I think our guild has 1,000 members or something. So
what the?
Yeah.
Was this your guys' best finish?
By far, yeah. Okay. And just overall best performance, I would say.
Yeah, it was a Hall of Fame, world top 100, 150 something.
So. Yeah.
I think it was 106.
106,
something like that. But it was definitely our best US finish.
It's US 24, right?
Yeah. I think maybe we came close on N'Zoth. I think it was pretty up there. That was a pretty tough tier. But I think we try and measure ourselves less on the rank and more just kind of how we performed as a raid. And it felt like this was far and away the best we've performed ever. Because we can't control the rank all the time.
Yeah. Dude, this expansion too, guilds are getting increasingly degenerate, including, but not limited to, Pop-Tart Doot Dog.
We can take a look at some graphs later, but we're not that degenerate. We're good.
I'm pretty sure I saw Might doing a 5-hour or a 5-day raid week at some point, multiple times, maybe.
There wasn't multiple times, but yeah, sure.
Hang on, we can consult some charts right now. Let's just see how many hours we spent on progression this raid.
Hang
on,
we're doing that now.
This is just me and Tettles real quick. Here's our we spent 52 hours in the raid, and let's take a look at Might's. Oh, more time in the raids, more time in killed nerfed version of the boss.
Oh wow, Echo I think probably spent less time in the raid than you guys too, or something.
No, wait, more? You mean more time?
More? Well, for the longest time, Method claimed that they were they rated the least because they spent the least amount of time in the raid or something like that. But now maybe that's not even maybe Ritual first kill.
Anyways, the spoiler alert is Nascent has both of our guilds beaten by a solid double-digit number of hours in there.
Not really close, actually.
Yeah. But we'll get to that, I think, later on in the show. I think we want to start off with discussion about, I think that's a little bit less about the guild and a little bit more about raiding wisdom in general. So this will be one of our probably 5 or so now episodes about becoming a better player or becoming a better raider, which are always some of my favorites to do, especially when we've got somebody with a unique perspective on to talk about that. So, yeah, let's get into it. I guess I'm going to start by asking Trell a question, which is, Trell, in your time in Nascent, how have you grown as a raider? What have been some categories you've seen you've felt nurtured and improvement in yourself? And we can use that maybe to springboard into more general discussion.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, so before Nascent, I raided in Encore, which is a top 10 US guild at the time. And I would say that the way we do things in Nascent is actually at a higher level. The difference is we raid a lot less, but we are significantly more prepared as a guild. I'd say for every single boss, we're way more efficient across the board. And so, like, even though I went down in US ranks, this has been a much better experience for me, and I grew a ton as a raider in terms of, like, just basically all the good stuff, like how to review logs, for example, how to be more prepared for raid, for example. It's just across the board, I'd say.
Just like we talked about, Trell. Perfect answer.
that was a good interview question, right? I didn't know that we were that Trell had to do a job interview on the spot.
Thank you. I like to keep us all on our toes here. That point though of preparation, I think, is a really good one, because I think personally I've felt that way. Like in my guild, is that as preparation gets better, just everything gets so much smoother. But even bringing that on the individual level, right? Like, of just, is it a case of, the leadership preparing versus how much is that guild culture that, like, everybody in there is learning what their job does, what their class does, what somebody that played their spec in some top ranked guild does. Is that, how much value are you guys gaining out of that, Treefee?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that that's something that, like, a lot of guilds run into is, the raid leader or the raid leadership will prepare countless hours for an encounter, and then they'll kind of complain that everybody else didn't really show up prepared when they see a raid for the first time, or when they see an encounter for the first time. That's like one of the most common complaints, I think. And I'm getting better about kind of sharing my knowledge, but I think that that's a very learned skill that everybody can improve on. Is if you have a psychopath like me who spends like countless hours outside of raid every single week preparing myself, being able to digest that information and communicate it to the rest of your team in a way that's easy for them to understand. Not everybody's like the same kind of learner like me. They have to actually be in there and do it themselves. I learn really well from like watching a video, and I can kind of like mimic that and visualize. But not everybody learns that way. So kind of like understanding the way that your individual raid team learns and digesting that information for them is pretty important.
It's interesting too, because with like the Race to World First, there's basically infinite amounts of POVs that you can find now. Because I remember even just like a full expansion ago, maybe like an expansion and a half ago, you would have to like wait for kill videos, or sometimes you wouldn't even have kill videos for certain bosses, and you would have to come up with like your strats on your own. But now with the abundance of like everything being streamed as well, you can go out and like seek your own POVs and like your specific strategies more often than not, at least in my experience, for what you're doing on a boss.
What I think was unique about this tier compared to other tiers is because of how big of a wall Halandris was, and a lot of our guilds reached it in the pre-nerf version, there were some public like VODs and videos of kills from the Race World First, but there were almost no public logs. So if you learned pretty well from logs, you were pretty shit out of luck, and you had to kind of learn from VODs and videos or just firsthand experience, because nobody had really killed the boss yet. It was so tough.
I had a fun time because there were literally no public Windwalker logs for any of those hard bosses yet. So I was like just doing it blind, just watching melee POVs. That was a lot of fun.
That may have been the case all the way even through Jailer, but
you didn't get my boy Seth Curry's Anduin log? Yeah. We were putting some up there.
One Jailer log the night before we killed it finally or something.
It's interesting because to me that it's such an interesting pattern, because there's kind of, it's mirrored as well as you get even higher up the ranks. So it's like, okay, as you start pushing to a certain level, the best strategy to get up there is like getting really good at learning from logs, and then all of a sudden, okay, to get higher than this, we have to be the first public log, right? Or we have to be before the first public log. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, watching kill videos, we have to get really good at that. And like our best bang for our buck is becoming good video analyzers. But obviously if you want to get world first, that doesn't help at all, right? So it's an interesting kind of conflict between that, where becoming really, really good at learning from others has that sort of diminishing return where once you actually do start getting into the nosebleed ranks, which I'm not saying any of our guilds are necessarily there, but it's an interesting pattern that I've been thinking about when thinking about like the Race to World First.
Absolutely.
Hypothetically, if Dranos maybe made it there one day.
Not saying that. Not saying that at all. Just an observation. Okay, yeah. I think the thing about Sepulchre as well, so in addition to Halandris being like a really big wall when we reached it, then there were 3 more hard bosses after Halandris that were like really hard. And so the tier ends up going, I mean, Hall of Fame closes like 4 weeks later, 3 weeks later than Sanctums, right? And I don't know. I mean, to some extent, do you credit the length of the tier with being like an equalizer for your guild versus the guilds that day raid earlier on, or is it a case of, what? How do you feel Sepulchre was different for your raiders potentially?
For sure. I mean, these bosses you couldn't really throw your face at and expect it to just fall over like you could in Sanctum, right? Like you could just raid a bunch extra. Fate Scribe and KT were eventually going to die because those bosses were just so easy. And Sylvanas was like kind of easy in her own right too, compared to a lot of end bosses. So a difficult tier definitely lends itself to the strengths of our guilds when we take preparation as seriously as we do. We only had like 20 pulls a night on Jailer when we were down to like the P3 progression because of just how long each pull was, and we only raid for 3 hours. So if we wipe to something stupid, that's like 5% of our raid night just gone like that. So we need to take like every pull very, very seriously. And I think tough tiers just really lent itself well to the way that we prepare and the way that we kind of collectively iterate night after night or in between pulls. We spend a lot of time like, if we get a new best, we'll kind of review that log or that VOD really quick. And since I'm outside the raid, I can pull those up really quickly. So as we're wiping or eating our food, preparing for the next pull, we can be reviewing a video from our last pull because I'm able to, like, I'm watching it in real time.
He's also insane. He'll be like looking at logs during the first 2 minutes of a boss fight, especially if we've done that fight for a while, like Jailer, because he knows he can call stuff at the exact right time while looking at a log because we've already done P1 like 50 times, So he'll have information for us ready by the time we get to P2 again from the last pull, which is insanely valuable in my opinion.
Yeah, that kind of, they were sort of doing that in Echo as well, where Scripe was muting for P1 and P2 and just looking at log stuff and then coming in for P3 only after they were at a certain point. I don't know, the whole 21st raider, the raid leader from outside the raid, though, I feel like there's a lot of insight here that's like, this is definitely good, right? Like having a 21st raider that's outside the raid that is effective and that is willing to do it is like really powerful. But there's not a lot of people that like are willing to do that, right?
That is certainly the hardest part, is having somebody.
Even similarly, like just doing like a lot of individual preparation, right? Like we can all agree that like if I spend 5 hours going into Jailer watching a video of somebody else playing my spec, like that's going to be really helpful. That's going to be better than spending 5 hours just pulling the boss even potentially extra. But it is also less fun, right? And so like you get this tension of like how do you decide which of these kind of effective but less fun things you're going to do, as like how much of that is like community based that you're encouraging each other to and talking with each other to get everybody on board with like this is the plan, and how do you like keep the motivation up for that?
Yeah, totally. I guess first, one more thought on the previous question of like kind of pros and cons of difficult tiers for a guild like ours.
Great.
The biggest con by far is sits, like benching people, because we extended our lockout from Halandris onwards, and so we carry usually between a 24 and 26 person roster. I think it was 25 this tier. So you're sitting 5 people who are going to be on the bench for at least a week, maybe 2, depending on how many they're sitting for. And that's a little bit different than like Race of World First, where if you're benched for Halandris, you'll probably come in a few days later when you're on Anduin or something. But for us, it's weeks because we only raid 9 hours, and so that feels really bad, and is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to move outside of the raid, because I got a lot more satisfaction seeing like the entire team be successful than like me myself playing the game. So I'd much rather give somebody else an opportunity who's like really passionate about the game than me, who's kind of like lukewarm about the game, but I love raiding. So that kind of just played to my strengths and was like a perfect marriage of things. Like you could not pay me enough to go farm M plus outside of raid. So I'm sorry if we're gonna like
Completely
talk about M
opposite of
plus
me.
or something.
Yeah, that's messed up.
I don't know. It's just not the content I enjoy. I'm a psycho and I like raiding and speed leveling. That's it. But Dradnus, what was your question again?
Okay, yeah. So like the less fun but effective parts of being a good raider. How do you get your raiders on board for doing that, or potentially internally? Like, how do you get yourself to do that? If you're ever in a position to, spend time doing something that's not fun that will make you more helpful for your raid team.
Yeah, totally. I think our guild really feeds off of difficult tiers. I think everybody's just like is excited when they see the Race of World First people just getting blasted by these bosses. They're like, yes, this is gonna be our tier. And so we just kind of feed off of that momentum as the bosses go on and kind of like take this seriously. We like, punching above our weight a little bit and kind of competing with some of the higher ranked guilds or the guilds that raid slightly more than us. So I don't have to do a whole lot to motivate the team. Like they stay up for hours after we're done with raid to talk about VODs, to talk about logs. Usually it's like, two of the same class are talking about how do we do this. The warlocks are talking about this, the druids and the rogues, whatever. We've got some folks on the team that carry some degenerate sleeping hours. So usually they're up all night talking about stuff. So there's a lot that happens that I don't need, like the guild leadership doesn't really need to motivate folks. But I think it's important that everybody kind of buys into our vision of like playing for each other, not playing for yourself. Like I always emphasize like our goal when we see a boss is to see as far as we possibly can as soon as we can so that we can get the reps, we can get the muscle memory. And I think that's kind of unwinding some habits from a lot of raiders who are new to our guild where they just want to do as much damage as possible. They may have been like kind of selfish players before, which is fine, but we have like a system that works for us. And if you buy in, like you'll be able to see it. So some of our younger players or players who haven't been with us for very long, it kind of takes a little bit to grow them into that mindset, but it's seemed to work so far.
I have a question. Did you think that you had a bad raid night as a raid leader this tier?
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? Because like I think that everybody can relate to having a terrible raid night, like as a raider, like as a raid leader outside of the raid. Like, what does that look like?
So, yeah, that's a really good question. I learned a lot about like myself this tier, and I think that's important when you're a raid leader or just a leader in general. Is like you have to kind of be the hardest on yourself. You can't expect other players to do things that you wouldn't hold yourself to. So something that I learned is I needed to allow people to actually take a break in the middle of raid. We usually have a break scheduled about halfway through for about 10 minutes so that people can go to the bathroom, grab a drink, just stand up and clear their head a little bit because it just takes so much focus. But what I was doing about halfway through the tier, especially on the harder bosses, was during break, I would pull up a VOD of our best pull and I would review it in Discord, and, whoever was there would jump in, and, you're incentivized if I'm doing that to jump in and participate in that instead of taking a break. And when I'm doing a VOD review, I kind of like expect that people kind of pay attention. So it wasn't like truly allowing people to take a break. And I think we noticed the fatigue set in the second half of raid after break because I didn't allow the people to actually like stand up, take an actual break. So we had one or two nights that stand out to me that I think we could have done a better job of just letting people relax, reset, and then come back a little bit fresher. We'll review the VOD eventually. It doesn't need to happen immediately.
According to chat, you're a vibe assassin. Is that true?
That's true sometimes. I can be tough on people for sure, especially if we're like noticeably lacking focus. I'm like, all right, guys, let's stop fucking around. Let's go. Sorry, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah,
on
you're allowed
this
to.
podcast?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
fine. He's not a vibe assassin. He's one of the more positive people on the team for sure.
Yeah, you do kind of need somebody in leadership that's able to like keep people from like trolling too much, right? I don't know. It depends. Different guilds have different vibes with that, and I think there's a lot of different right answers for it as well. It's just a case of like you need to make sure you've lined up a roster of people that will work well in each environment with that correct environment. But I think that generally the best is like usually having a pretty good time and then able to say, okay, we got to focus rather than once you've like wiped in P1 a couple times or something. Yeah.
So, okay, so like as an individual, like inside the raid, what do you guys do to kind of have a mental reset whenever you're playing bad for a night? Because I know that I had like one really bad night on Jailer and one really bad night on Anduin.
Is that for me or Trell?
I think that's for anybody who fields it.
I would say a lot of us just take it upon ourselves. Like if we feel there's any kind of bad vibe, there's like 5 or 6 of us that are like, any smilers? Anyone smiling? Like anyone vibing?
Oh,
Just
Yeah.
get back into it and reset your mind.
Vibe check.
In my guild, I'm
Something
in charge of
Treefee-
morale, so I have to. It's my responsibility whenever anybody's like that to sort it out. That's my responsibility as officer.
I mean, morale is
yeah.
actually really important and something that probably should be talked about more in the rating scene. But also, there's a quote from what's that show called? Ted Lasso. It's called "Be a Goldfish,"
Damn right.
and that means like forget what you did 5 seconds ago that's bad and that'll impact your mental for the next pull. Just go again.
Yeah, and that's another thing too is like we never have to be hard on people because when people make a mistake, like they're hard on themselves for sure, and so it's usually up to us to like encourage them, like, hey, it's fine, don't worry about it. But Dranos, I think like something that you said made me think of your guild a little bit because your Jailer kill video, you guys were acting a fool in P1. It was just complete nonsense. And I think that's a testament to how well you guys played this tier because P1 was hard. It was no joke. Like you really had to kind of focus and be consistent there. And you guys were joking around for like half that poll.
Yeah. It was to be fair, the kill pool was more memes than usual, but
Sure.
yeah, I think that in long boss fights, like whenever you have a boss fight that's going over 10 minutes, P1 is a time to like keep people like in order to get people to be able to switch on focus, you need to make sure that it's not always on, right? Otherwise it starts to degrade. So yeah, I think that doing that, like keeping people lighter there can help keep them from getting too tense and stuff.
It's made me get so much more respect for like some of the Race to World First people. Like I don't know how they are able to keep their team focused for that long, and they're facing things that are much more difficult than we are. Like the boss itself, the gear that they have, it's crazy. They must do some like meditation or something. I don't know. You guys were there, so but
yeah, I mean, the best part is that like Liquid and Echo have 2 different great answers to like raid morale, where Liquid, it is just like the dumbest memes flying all over the place. Again, in P1, P2 of fights, and then focus up in P3s, that kind of thing. And then Echo is just memes are pretty kept down. Everybody's like pretty focused, and if there's a joke cracked, it's like right at the start of the pull or before a pull, and then
no memes. No memes.
Somebody comes in with no memes. So
Dude,
I don't know.
They literally call no memes as a raid call. Like, what in the world is that?
Yeah, well, my guild has we have no stories because we had one of our tanks just going off about how it was always story time and that we were wiping. And so yeah, that's our version of that for when things it's time to focus, that kind of thing.
It's definitely good to have a healthy balance. Sometimes I feel like I joke too much, and I'm like, okay, I gotta mute myself for the next 30 minutes so I don't overdo it. I'm sure other people feel like that in the raid too.
Yeah, I think it's part of striking the balance of like getting that atmosphere that works for everybody. But it's tough, right? Because like I don't know, getting 20 people that all agree on how often they want to raid, how much prep they want to do, what atmosphere they want the raid to be like, how they want the benching policy to be, and all of these sorts of characteristics of guild. Like it's pretty easy for me to say, and I do say a lot, oh yeah, just find 20 people who all agree with that and put them all in the same guild, right? But like I don't know. Invariably, you're going to end up with some tension, some conflicts between how different people best work, right? And you're trying to find some kind of synthesis for that. So,
especially as your guild improves over time, like the goalpost can change a little bit. The like, ooh, what are we capable of now that we have like this roster, and now that we're doing this and that, can kind of change where people's expectations are.
yeah, I think that's a definitely like, is it a case of like, oh, this person's goals have changed, or is it a case of like, oh, the guild's goals have changed, but we've got some people that are still like stuck kind of in that haven't been kept up with it potentially.
Dude, on God, the hardest thing is removing people from your roster. That is the worst fucking feeling ever. I am not unhappy with no longer being an officer, because having to sit people or remove people from the roster for whatever reason, whether it's their goals don't align with the guild's goals, was actually most of the issues. That very unfun, very unfun experience.
Yeah, it's terrible having to make those kinds of decisions. I would say like I'm very fortunate, and the rest of our leadership is very fortunate to have a guild master like Dobie who shoulders a lot of those really tough conversations with people. So, he kind of elevates the other leaders in the guild to be able to like leverage their strengths. But his strength has always been like roster management and team morale and everything. So we got a great GM alongside, me and the other leadership.
What do you speaking of that, like the splitting of the responsibilities of raid leader and guild master, right? Like sometimes we see a lot of guilds that combine that role, right? It's a fairly natural combination in a lot of cases, right? Just to have the one person at the top. What's it like having that power sort of delegated, and how do you decide, where one person's responsibilities end and the other begins?
Well, first of all, I'd be a terrible GM. I just don't have the skill sets at all. Dobie definitely does. And Dobie was the raid leader, like the sole raid leader for a very long time when I joined the guild, and then for years after. My personality is such that I like to contribute in that way. So I've like slowly started to absorb those responsibilities. And then in the last couple of years, he always played a tank role. So it's pretty hard to raid lead as a tank. Like you have a good amount of agency in what's happening, but you don't have the best like oversight and visibility. And I was always a ranged DPS player, so it kind of made sense to shift that over to me. And then he moved off of tanking into a Shadow Priest role and Healer Priest role this tier, and learning a new class, learning a new spec, and raid leading, no shot. So I kind of like jumped in to help that a little bit. But it's been a bit of a transition. We kind of play to each other's strengths a little bit, and I also enjoy delegating certain calls to other people, so it's not only my voice all the time. Pretty easy to drown out just one person's voice. So like there are some instances in Jailer Prog where Trell would be calling things out for the melee. Same with Anduin Prog. I kind of delegate certain mechanics, like, hey, call this out every single time, and it's a good break in the actual like voices that people are hearing during the poll.
Even as a 21st man, it's gonna be hard to like watch the Kingsmorn group while you're watching the upstairs group and stuff like that. Watch what people are doing on far side of Jailer. This tier more than ever, I felt like there was a bunch of different squads of people doing very different strategies. Like I'm sure raid leading that was not exactly the easiest thing whenever you're having to look at like 3 POVs.
I need some tips on this, because I know like on N'Zoth, for example, Max had 2 separate streams, like Psychus Group 1, Psychus Group 2. And I just don't know how to do that. So we have two different people streaming. So I'll just like click on one person's stream and then click on the other person's stream, depending on what I need to see. And then once I know that one downstairs group is good, I'll just only watch the upstairs group after that. So any tips?
You could technically, if you have 3 monitors, you could technically just have 2 Discord accounts.
Oh, a different Discord account. Okay.
You could have 2 or 3 Discord accounts. Alternatively, I mean, you can just turn off people that aren't streaming to that POV. Like, if you like right click on the like Discord screen that we're in right now, you can see a thing that says show non-video participants. If you uncheck that, it will like remove all of the shitter names, and it will only show the
people that are streaming.
POVs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't call my raiders shitters, please.
Unbelievable.
It will show the non-streamer people. It will no longer show the non-streaming people. It will only show the two POVs that are, or like multiple POVs of the people that are streaming. You can watch those simultaneously as well, but it will be in like it'll be a smaller screen than like the full screen one that you can have.
That's the tip of the year.
That's a good tip. Yeah.
Thanks,
Speaking
fellas.
of good tips, let's take a brief break from our discussion. We've kind of mixed our two main topics anyway, so it's not really a huge delineation between the two, but we do have to do tip of the week at some point. And since we were talking about tips, it was irresistible to segue to it. My tip of the week comes from my raid. It's not really a tip, but it's a good play that was made after a mistake that I made, and I'm now obligated to show as my tip of the week. So
How'd you get bullied into this? Hold on.
well, I mostly, I deserve it because so here's this idiot tank getting hit by a green circle that you'll see. It's kind of hard to see, but gets hit by a green circle, gets the thing in melee. But then look at this young magician blinking to the side, alter times, blinks forward, grabs it, alters back, and gets in to get dispelled instantaneously, saving that one from being out. Very good. Gamer move, dodges the claws, does a... despite my horrific misplay, saves
What's
the raid.
his name? What's our hero's name?
Unbearable.
Oh, it's Jason.
Jason, yeah.
Let's go, Jason.
Guest on the show before as well. Former GM raid leader of my guild. Now just
I did that
mage pumper.
I did that same thing like 3 times last night because the range wouldn't do it. So now
one
I'm
up
going
him,
to tell
one
the
up
mages
him.
to do that.
Yeah.
Talk him immediately.
I had
All
to
right.
watch that clip like 10 times to understand what was going on. It looked like the mage just disappeared. I didn't see that he blinked into melee and grabbed it and altered back. I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah, just instant reaction. No, there was no call. I didn't say like, come help me. I just said like, oh, I guess I'll keep this for a while. But genius brain detected a way to solve the problem and did it. So that's my former raid leader.
Jetness was like, I guess I'll die.
Well, I mean, I'm a tank, so
He was your raid leader?
Yeah, he was until this was his first tier, is just no responsibilities, just doing damage, and
Isn't he an officer still?
no, he literally just does damage now, and he does so much damage
okay.
now that he doesn't have to do any of the other stuff. It's crazy.
Unlocked his potential.
Yeah, it's when people talk about like raid leaders doing less damage because they're having to raid lead, it's like, oh my god,
Oh yeah, 100%.
it's like a 30% damage increase.
Like we talked about earlier a little bit, but tanks raid leading especially, I just like it's so scared watching tanks that have to raid lead a hard boss like Jailer when they're getting like destroyed the entire pull and they can't look at anything but their own health. Like that is so scary.
Big shout out to all the Shadow Priest raid leaders out there. That spec is terrible to raid lead on. It is so fast. You have no time to think.
Yeah, I've heard you can't do anything when you're void forming except focus entirely on your damage buttons as well.
That's right.
So
Real.
yeah.
And it's also counterintuitive to being a raid leader because if you have a stop damage call, you're legally obligated to not stop if you're in void form.
Actually-
the buttons just press themselves.
If you are the person who makes the stop damage call, you can just call it 2 globals earlier, and then you just get to keep doing damage, right? That's what I do whenever I'm
I
trying to
would be
parse.
so salty. I'd be so salty if there's a stop damage call, the raid leader's just continuing to hit the boss.
All right, Troll, what is your tip of the week?
All right, so mine is this handy weak aura because of a really annoying bug in the game where if you swap covenants, your unity might not work until you either log out, log back in, or take it off your equipment and then put it back on. So this weak aura will pop up with some text every time there's a raid check, and if it's bugged, I don't even know how it detects the bug, but if it is bugged, it'll tell you. So, I mean, if you don't want to use the weak aura, I don't even have it personally, but every time I swap covenants, I take off my freaking Unity and then put it back on because of that stupid bug.
Yeah, we've had
I
this.
actually haven't had Unity bug on me yet. I don't know how.
I personally haven't either, but I didn't used to get affected by like the soulbinds not working either, and I feel like it's the same people who had that bug before are having this one now. I don't know what's causing it though, but yeah, it's a great weak aura to have. 'Cause just like, why not, right? Like, if it is bugged, you want to know. It's really awful to like find out. We had some like frost mages that were like, why am I not ever proccing my Deathborn? They're just like, oh.
I went a whole poll on Lords of Dread without proccing Bone Dust Brew, and I was like, okay, I'm checking this every time now.
Yeah. All right, Treefee, what is your tip of the week?
Mine. Yeah, I've been fishing for this all week.
We've heard.
It's better be very good
agonizing over
then.
my tip of the week. It's all right. So my tip is for people who are progressing on any boss, but in particular the last 4 bosses. Those bosses do a ton of raid-wide damage, especially like Lords, Ragallon, Jailer. My tip is for the entire raid to get the avoidance jewelry pieces, either the neck or the ring. I don't have like a graphic or an image of this if you wanted to like pull something
Quick
up, but
Oxane ring. Yeah, I'll find
exactly. If everybody's wearing that, it gives each person roughly like 3 to 5% avoidance, I think, which is huge. It doesn't show up really in the damage meters or the healing meters, but in order to see as far into these fights as possible, it is huge.
Yeah, it's a 262 crafted ring, and
make sure you buy the one with
guarantee
avoidance though. Yeah, because you can get ones with like a main stat thing orb that you have to collect, and some of our raiders were tricked into thinking that one was any good. It's very little extra benefit, and the avoidance is so nice. Plus, it comes with a little heal proc too that'll do like a little bit of HVS, but it's the avoidance that you're all about. Yeah.
I actually have a ring with the avoidance like on it. In addition to that, I have like the cloak enchant plus I'm Theatar, and that's just 10% passive DR. Did you guys know that you can get avoidance over 20% this patch or this expansion? I didn't know that until like
I did not know that.
Recently that you can. I had somebody in a Discord I'm in at like 45% avoidance because they were doing weird stuff, but don't worry about it. Apparently, you could just like get really high amounts of avoidance.
Yeah,
45% avoidance is basically taking half damage from almost everything in the game. That is nuts.
Even as a tank, like the Jailer tank blast in P2, that is one of the, not the dot component, which is probably the more lethal part of it, but the upfront hit, which is still a pretty lethal part, gets reduced by avoidance. So there's a lot of value. The Meteor Cleave, like there's a lot of benefit for everybody to do this. The other consideration, though, is you could also do a speed BOE. That's another, you can buy the rings with speed instead of avoidance, and those ones, there's an argument to be made for as well. I know I've seen a lot of good players using that also. If you just, you have to think for yourself, like, what's going to be better for me here? But if you ever find yourself dying by like 200, and you're not wearing an avoidance ring, then you should get yelled at. So
yeah, I definitely lived on Jailer like I think 3 separate times, if I recall, during Prague at like 1% or 2% health, and I would have died without the avoidance piece. So it was definitely a good grab.
You guys are all big advocates for the speed gem, right?
There's 2 speed gems. There's the one that's like speed increased by 13 for each Shadowlands gem, which is only good if you have a lot of other Shadowlands like gem sockets. But then there's the 5% movement speed gem. I think it's good.
The 5% one's a banger.
I don't use it because that's a DPS loss, but I think other people should.
Stacks with the 3% one for leveling.
True.
Dreadnought says literally as a Blood Death Knight tank, by the way.
Look, man, the boss is going to be wherever I am anyways because I'm the tank, so it's not going to be a damage loss.
Okay, what about whenever you have to waddle on out to that pillar that you forget to explode sometimes?
I play Night Fae, so I just do a little blink. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Tettles. Clip of the week time. Okay, yeah, this is a good one. This do you want to direct our attention in this clip to any people? This is from Team Ambition's M+, where we look at the screen here.
Please show your eyes to the top left-hand corner of the screen. What is that Tauren doing over there? JPC the man, why are you over there? The world may never know. Nerf in this clip is actually like, JPC, go to triangle. Look at him. He's literally just standing next to the triangle. What is he doing?
Okay. All right. A most charitable possible take here is it was bugged and it looked like it was in a different place on his screen than it actually was. That's what I'm going with. That's
Can
my
someone explain that
explanation.
clip to me in rating terms?
There was he was walled off from the boss, and if he'd moved 2 steps into that teleporter, he would have been right next to it and able to attack again.
They timed to 30 though.
Yeah, congratulations.
So they're far better than me. JPC the man, not even hitting the boss. Doesn't even need to hit the boss.
Yeah, who needs it?
Still times to 30.
All right, let's go into some more discussion about Nascent and the tier, Sepulcher, or Sepulcher, or however you guys want to wrongly pronounce that word also. We have...
It's actually Sepulcher, but yeah, good job, bozo.
It was a multi-level joke.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we have a little bit of graphical assistance with us here for this, which is progress duration by encounter. We already showed a little bit me and Tuttles flaming each other earlier of our guilds, but this is yours of time spent in boss combat with each boss and number of pulls as well going into the tier. And the number we see here, 40 hours total, and then some of the pull counts here, right? 100 on Halandris, 200-ish on Jailer. These are very quick amounts. The bosses are largely, after nerfs. So like, people always compare these to like Race to World First numbers. Like, first off, they were like learning, and second off, like they didn't have videos, and also the bosses are pre-nerf and they had worse gear and all that stuff. But still, those obvious caveats aside, these compared to other guilds that are killing around the same time as you. I mean, obviously, since you're raiding less hours, right, you have to be doing it more efficiently. And this is a pretty efficient looking graph. I mean, all of the first 6 bosses here even are, I think, quite good too.
Yeah, definitely. And you're totally right. Like, definitely don't compare our pull count to Race to World First. You could probably bucket together the World 50 to like 150 or something as a tier where pull counts kind of make sense to compare against each other, because they're encountering a similar difficulty of bosses with similar gear. But definitely not above that.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is cool on this page as well is just one of the things about this Warcraft logs. This is just the guild progress page. You can see these graphs of guild progression, and so you can see, like, first off, like some of the characteristics of your guild's progression, like on Halandris here. I guess this isn't even really that spicy, because these aren't like P3 pulls necessarily, but the consistency of getting to that second intermission towards when you're about to kill the boss here this is very high.
But they just killed the boss randomly.
And then just eliminating the boss back to back. Pretty cool, taking it down from 25 to 0 in 2 pulls.
Yeah, we 5-healed it that week. That was right after they nerfed some of the damage check. They nerfed the boss health, right?
I think they did that at the same time.
Yeah,
health.
And they nerfed the moats and the tank beam not exploding the bombs anymore, which allowed us to play soccer a lot more efficiently in the last phase, which is why it only took us 2 clean pulls in P3 to end up killing it. But if you scroll back up, Dratnos, like, it's very important, and I look at a lot as a raid leader to Halandris, the consistency that you had pointed out, where we're getting to that exact part of the fight very consistently. Like, I spend a lot of time like striving for this, and then when we're able to successfully have a night that goes like this, I often like go back and review that VOD, and I think, like, how can we kind of bottle this consistency and replicate it so we can keep doing that over and over again? Because it's literally those 7 or 8 pulls that we just learned P2 intermission, and then after that it was just a matter of getting there, and the boss could die any pull, which is really cool.
Yeah, the value is just so intense compared to, sometimes you see a little bit more like on Anduin here. This happened to everybody, right? Where it's just like every other progression pull, you're back to seeing a phase 1 wipe because somebody didn't kill an ad or something, or because some blasphemy exploded, right? And it's a lot harder to make progression efficiently in that environment. Although again, Anduin, everybody experienced this on Anduin. But yeah, then also on Jailer, I would say that this P2 consistency here. Jailer is one where you see even more spikiness from a lot of P3. You see even more spikiness from a lot of like P3, P4 progression from a lot of guilds. And here again, it's a lot of, not even necessarily just around the same, but like progression pulls back to back to back, which is, this is how you make progression, right? Like,
and that was one night too. Like, pull, I think it was like 120 through 140 something was one night, and so we were just gaming that night. Yeah, that was huge. We basically learned all of P3 in just that one night, which is really awesome. If you compare that to Tettles asked earlier, like when some of our bad nights were, if you look at right when we hit P3 for the first time, I think it was pull like 70 or 80 something. It's that vertical dotted line. Pull 77, that's when we like phased into P3 for the first time. And it was about halfway through our raid night, and we did a VOD review and didn't allow people to really get a break. And we pretty much spent the whole rest of the night not getting there again. lots of
Wiping
P2
in
deaths,
P1.
lots of P1 deaths.
Yeah, I
So it
remember
was
that.
just kind of like we over focused on where we got to, not quite realizing that we actually still had quite a lot of work to do to get there consistent. So after that night, you could see a pretty sharp downward trend in the performance from there. So I think we learned a lot from that night. Very similar to when we got to P4 for the first time. There's a lot of like shenanigans in P3 and P1 that, you know, we probably didn't need to see there. So definitely a lot of lessons that we learned in terms of like consistency and execution once we get to a certain point, that I think is pretty evident in some of these graphs, which is why I really like these.
I think that this tier specifically too, consistency was one of the most important things, because like a lot of individual mistakes could like instantly wipe your raid on a significant amount of bosses. Like missed kicks on Anduin, blasphemy deaths on Anduin, those are just instant wipes. If somebody messes up a blood on Jailer, you may as well just jump in the hole. If you have hole deaths on Jailer, you may as well just jump in the hole. If somebody accidentally wiping you on Rygolon, for example, there was just a lot of points where individual mistakes would cascade into a full raid wipe very quickly, and it's that consistency that you were hitting on. That was like almost by far the most important thing this tier, is having 20 players that were in on that fight being the most consistent versions of themselves on an individual level. It was a really weird tier because not every fight is like that, and more often than not, we don't have a lot of bosses that are like that. But this tier is just Halandras, Anduin, Rygolon, and Jailer, I all felt like were, if you didn't have super consistent players, you were going to struggle.
Lahoum too, honestly. I think there were like 6 bosses like that.
I hardly know him.
I think Jailer is like the epitome of all of that you were just saying, Tuttles, especially P3 onward, where it's just such a nuanced dance that every single player in that raid has to know every step of that dance. Any single person out of line means that Azeroth doesn't get healed. It means that the knock is baited in the wrong position, or the defile's baited, or somebody weird gets chains that isn't part of the chain gang. Like every one person out of position can kind of cause a cascading effect. So yeah, you're totally right, and I think Jailer was a very big example of that.
Yeah, it was also this kind of fight where you still had a lot of difficulty and learning to do in P1 when you saw P2 for the first time, and you still had a lot of learning in P2 to do when you saw P3 for the first time, like you talked about. Like, you know, just because you get there once, but it's like there's still actually, it's a really lethal phase that has a lot of people like not, you know, by the time when you first push P3, there's a bunch of people in your raid who've still not gotten like certain mind control overlaps and those that are like, those things that are really hard and that require them to be still in progression mode and not in farm mode in that phase. And so that's I think it was another unique characteristic of that fight that some guilds flourished in and other guilds found really frustrating, because it felt like you weren't getting to the part in the fight you were progressing, even though the difficulty of progression was still going on there.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I don't know if you wanted to... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, completely anecdotally, like, we got to P3, and I still needed to learn, like, 2 or 3 blood movements in phase 2. Like, I was not ready to do P3 prog, even though we had already made it there.
Yeah, because you're also getting to P3, and if you have any less than, like, 87% health on Azeroth or something, he just instantly kills her, and you can't really make any progression. So P2 really mattered, and P1 for that matter. But I don't know, Dranos, if you wanted to look at those graphs anymore. I think we did this a little bit before the show, but I really wanted to highlight Northern Skies progression. And I think it's usually a good practice for any guild to kind of have an aspirational guild that is like above them in progression, that you kind of look up to, that is generally like a top performing guild. We've been looking at Northern Sky pretty intimately since Nihilotha. Like, I watched so many German streams. I was saying I should be like fluent in German with how much German on Twitch I've listened to this year, but I mean, they just owned Jailer. Like, the level of consistency they showed once they got to P4 the first time is the most insane thing I've ever seen. Those last 6 pulls, I think the one P1 pull was somebody DCing, so you like don't even count that. That's
crazy.
Yeah,
that's so good. Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff, like, as a raid leader, I'm like, holy shit, I need to go like look and see what this guild does in terms of their preparation, their raid leading. I'd like listen to what the raid leader's saying and see if I can kind of like replicate that.
But then none of your guildies understood German, and so it didn't really work that well.
It did not work at all.
You got them Duolingo sponsorships.
started counting down from 3 in German, and nobody knew what was going on.
So how does this work? How does this work if they're running a specifically like a very different composition from yours? Like what would you do different if they were running something that's like not close to your comp?
I think that that only really, I don't think that matters too much, actually.
Okay.
I think it only really matters at maybe like Northern Skies level or like above that. But we could really make anything work with anybody. Maybe with the exception of making sure that you have enough like healing cooldowns and rallying cries from warriors to cover the critical parts in the fight. But other than that, as long as you have a similar amount of melee and ranged, I think at guilds at our level, it doesn't really matter. Like you said, you really just got to take the most consistent 20 people based on your best guess of your own roster that will work. I didn't mean to avoid your question, but I thought about it quite a lot.
I know that like whenever we do, I know in Might, like whenever we do our stuff, because we also raid, like we don't raid 9 hours, we raid 12, but like we normally end up looking at ethical because generally we run a more similar composition to them. We've always ran like we used to Resto Druid for a while, and so ethical is a guild that played Resto Druid or played Mistweaver Monk, and our healing comp kind of slotted in really well. With kind of what they were doing CD wise, and so we would always kind of, I would say, mirror what they were doing, but we had a better time looking at what they were doing because they're similar to Northern Sky in the fact that they don't raid a ton and they vastly overperform their amount of time that they raid.
Same with Honestly. If you're ever looking for non-traditional comps, Pumps pretty much always plays Bear Druid. They usually always have a Rep Paladin. So yep. And they own too. So we definitely look a lot at Honestly. I haven't looked too much at Ethical. I'll probably start doing that.
Ethical always used to be, yeah, that would be, because my guild would always look at them as well. That was good.
And then you bought a mage for them that one time too.
We did, yeah. Well, that's we know that guy, so we can like ask about really know what they do. Yeah, we've purchased his services before.
Yeah. LLC.
But what about you, Dratnos? Like, how did you feel like your guild did this year? I mean, objectively, from the outside looking in, you guys fucking owned, especially if you compare it to last year. So I'm curious, like, what some of those improvements that you made were.
Yeah, I mean, we picked up a lot of really good players coming into the tier, so I think that has to be like much of it. So one of the other good guilds on our servers died, and we picked up like 5 of their players, and several of them are like really good. So I think the average quality of just play has gone up. But yeah, we put a focus on preparation this tier. We've been doing, I think the main thing is really watching kill videos together. We use a website to let us watch a YouTube video all on the same like pause, and play it together. And we do that for every hard boss multiple times, like as we reach phases. That's been something we implemented this year, and I think it saved us a huge amount of time, and I think that definitely did a lot of it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, morale is a hard thing to pin down, but it was definitely something that was way better this tier. We changed a lot of like structural stuff and moved some responsibilities around coming into the tier as well. So those are always things to look at as places that you might be able to get some value in, but also, I think we did really bad on Sylve, so like, I think we dramatically underperformed there. So I think it was less of a.
Could only go up.
Yeah,
like summon Soul Render into Sepulcher.
Oh God, Soul Render was at least that was only like one day, but because we used to we day rated that boss because we had
80 wipes.
Yeah.
Oh,
but we took that, we cut hours coming into this tier, so that I think was really good though, because we used to do this one day raid first week thing.
Yeah,
we did that since N'Zoth, and it worked really well on N'Zoth, and it worked fine on Sire, but in Sanctum we played really bad that day, so we just decided to cut it and only raid evenings, and
yeah,
that's
another interesting point that you bring up about like kill videos that you kind of collectively watch.
Yeah,
I think something that really helped me as a raid leader is in order to have like an initial strategy coming into a boss that you haven't seen before, like say you kill Halandris with like an hour left in raid, you really got to make the most out of that first hour on Anduin before the rest of the guild kind of has an opportunity to review what Anduin does, because you're so focused on Halandris leading up to that night. So something that's been very critical for me is like not only looking at kill videos. I think a lot of raid leaders can get stuck on replicating kill videos, but a kill video is like the final dance that they've already figured out all of the things that led to the kill video. So that is kind of like the Sistine Chapel. And you know, when you see a boss for the first time, you're looking at the completely blank canvas and you got to make it yourself. And so watching Twitch VODs of the first time one of these guilds that you look up to sees that boss, and you just watch their first 10 to 20 pulls, see what wipes them. And then you're like, okay, here are the pitfalls that Northern Sky ran into. Here's how we're going to learn much faster than them. And I think you saw one of our strengths this tier was like, we would hit these like phase thresholds. Like we would see P1 of Anduin, we would see like P1 intermission on Anduin way faster than a lot of other guilds. I think it was like pull 30 or something that we got through it cleanly. We saw it for the first time on like pull 14 or something, pull 17. And then same with Jailer, like we hit the phase thresholds really quickly because we spent a lot of time understanding what was tripping guilds up early on and kind of mitigating those. Like we saw P2 on like pull 15 or something on Jailer, which I thought was pretty crazy. But then, you know, you kind of run into the consistency things. Like you need to see it enough times in order to get the reps. But that's a huge recommendation I would give to some raid leaders is don't only look at the kill videos, but look at the Twitch VODs of the first night that guild spent on that boss and see what tripped them up.
Yeah, we came at this sort of the other way, which was like, we would just watch the kill video again when we started P2, but we would watch starting from P2 and just like watch that phase a couple times. Then when we got to P3, it was like, okay, let's watch P3 and let's do our movement for P3. Like let's do a dry run in the room even, because you could do that on Jailer and just like run around and pretend that we're doing the phase right now and have everybody go to their spots.
Yeah, I think we would do that too, because I think kill videos are easier to digest for the rest of the raid than the wipe videos. But I think as a raid leader, if you're one crafting strategy, you have to understand what's tripping guilds up before they get to the kill video.
Write that one down.
Yeah, I think that's that is one of the coolest things we've definitely been, at least in my guild, been reverse engineering a lot of the things, and you only see the results, and it's, dude, okay, whenever you're only looking at the results, it's easy to be like, oh, we're really low in MC damage compared to this guild, or our healing cooldowns are like a little bit off time, blah blah blah. But at the same point, you don't see the 30 or 40 pulls that got them to those points, and that, like, you miss a lot of nuance just with the general curve of progression. I do think that that's actually a really important point. That's something that,
yeah. And then what you can do, like for example on Halandris, like the first time you get to an intermission, the people with the bombs are just like YOLOing it. They're like, I'm just sending this shit. I've never seen it before. But if you can pull some people aside before you start Halandris preparation, and is like, if and when we get to the intermission, like you're going to be, this other person who's not in a bomb group is going to be like yoinking the bomb and running it ahead so that the bomb groups have like an easier time with it. That's some stuff that you can do based on what's tripping guilds up, is like, they figure that out dozens of pulls into intermission progression, but you can just do that right away and pull a couple people aside and prepare them ahead of time.
Yeah, because there's kind of like, 40 different progressions that you have to do on a boss, of like each different person in your raid having to learn like 0 to 4 different like hard jobs they're having to do in each phase. And sometimes like you can kind of get the first one started, right, rather than just like doing them in sequence. You can kind of do them in parallel if you do it that way. So I think that's a great way to
you can also just hear when raid leaders are calling out personals on a kill video, and you kind of like reverse engineer, like, why are they calling personals there? Is it like a specific overlap that they're worried about? And also shout out to Olivia in our guild, our healing officer. She's incredible, one of the best healers I've ever had the pleasure of raiding with. She creates our spreadsheet for healing CDs. which is obviously very important, and then kind of imports that over to our ERT note. And usually you kind of create the healer spreadsheet that maps out the entire fight. Like, this is where we use our rally, our AM, our roars, like whatever. What you want to do as a raid leader is you want to condense that and completely over optimize the healing CDs for each individual mechanic. So like in P1 on Jailer, the first time we see it, like we're using a major healing CD for every single mechanic, even though we won't use it eventually on the kill, just to see farther, just to live longer. So that first spread, like we're using a rally on it, because what if two melee aren't used to it and they just hit each other and die?
Which definitely happened.
They would never do such a thing. They would never die to torment.
So I think like our first night on Jailer, literally the first spread of the fight where everybody should already be spread out, we're ripping rally and AM to make sure that we don't die there. We want to die later, and then eventually we'll peel those healing CDs back as we get more reps.
I have a question, a bit unrelated, but how do you guys just as a whole feel about the thing that Dratnos talked about, where it's like a bunch of different people in your guild have 4 almost unique jobs on specific fights?
Like what?
Do you guys like that this tier? Like Trell?
Oh, just like from the design of the raid being that way?
Yeah, from a design of the raid. Because, dude, it was a lot. Like, almost all of the bosses were like that in a way that they're not normally.
Yeah, there's a lot of individual responsibility. Like you said, like my guild had me kill the Lost Souls on Anduin because that's what my spec excelled at. Very even AOE damage, totally controlled, no dots. I personally loved that. I want to say it's probably kind of frustrating for some of the other raid members that they have to sacrifice a lot of their damage for the Windwalker, but I mean, I'll take it.
Well, I mean, they're there to do, like, okay, so the Warlock in that position, if they're playing Demo, they're there to do boss damage, right?
Absolutely,
So,
and like the Warlocks were assigned to the Monster Souls mainly because I was handling the Lost Souls. Mm-hmm. So that was probably a net benefit throughout the team.
But then there's also like Jailer, where there's like multiple side. Okay, so there's like one set group of people who are probably killing the MCs that are very, very specifically there to kill the MCs, like a Windwalker monk. Yeah. And then there's like 2 sets of blood groups, and then you have the tanks kind of doing their own thing. Tanks normally do their own thing anyways, but like it's 4 very distinct parts of the fight. It felt like.
Yeah, and then melee doing all their hard jobs as well on Jailer, so
hitting the MC mobs and complaining. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not falling in holes, very hard.
Impossible challenge for melee players.
Did you guys like that though? It was very interesting take, I think, just on the raid design.
I did personally. I think it's kind of like what Dratnos is saying. It's like there's 42 different like individual progressions that you're talking about. So there's the progression of like the lagging group in P2. That blood group, there's the progression of the leading group, there's the progression of the melee and how they encounter all of the different overlaps. So it is kind of interesting to piece all of those together, and then seeing it come together is obviously awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a large part of the reason for the difficulty of that encounter as well, was just how rapid fire all of these mechanics are interlaid on top of each other. And how much they kind of interact with each other, right? Like, you, in order to progress as one of the blood people, you needed the MC group to be doing their job well so that you got broken quick so you could get back quick. And, if you wanted the melee to be doing well, the blood groups had to be aiming correctly and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Did you like it, Tuttles?
I liked it. How about you, Tuttles?
I thought it was okay. I thought that had
PTSD.
I thought I had to do a lot. Like Moonkin this raid was particularly hard. I liked it, but there was a lot is what I felt like. But again, I had Prototype Pantheon into Halahuvum, into Halandra's bombs, into Anduin. Raglan was kind of a meme, and then obviously Jailer. So,
but even on
it was a
Raglan,
ton of different shit that I'm doing.
Yeah, there was a lot of Moonkin work for sure. I will also say that like I worry that I like the Jailer because I felt good about how we did on the Jailer, right? And so like sometimes you just feel good about bosses, like you feel good about the design of bosses that you did well on, and it's like because of that sentiment. And similarly, like you feel bad about the bosses you did badly on.
I thought Jailer was okay. I don't know.
On the topic of boss design, what do you guys, my personal opinion is I love it when they design fights, especially end bosses, that don't phase at a certain percent. That P1 actually matters and P2 actually matters, and it's not like every time you reach a new phase, like once you get Sylvanas to 70%, it's like you might as well just start from 0 and it's a new fight. Or
it's maybe
Sired and
a hot
Activist.
take. My favorite boss of all time is Fallen Avatar.
I love that boss. Yeah,
I love that boss. I thought that boss was so sick.
yeah, I agree.
I like the jailer boss health not being the phase factor, right? Like I liked it being time based for P1 and basically time based for P2 unless your tank screwed up. And yeah, I think that because like the problem with doing it the other way is you get stop DPS, right? Like for it to be possible to escape Sylvanas P1 within 100 pulls, necessarily by the time you get to 170 pulls, you're calling stop damage, right? Like it has to be that way for it to work.
It's not only the boss percent too. It's like how much you heal Azeroth in P1 matters too, because that carries over for the rest of the fight. So it's not only the boss damage, it's everything else that you do. I like it when it feels impactful, and I like it when it's difficult. Otherwise, I think it kind of kills the end boss vibe when you're spending 300 pulls on it.
It's definitely an upgrade to the end bosses that have like a weird ad phase for the first 2 minutes, you know, where like nothing matters except just killing some ads, and then you finally fight the real boss in P2. That's happened like what 4 tiers in a row.
Cahoon, Ajara, yeah.
You could even say that Sire and Sylph have those.
Well, so Sire and Sylph had P1s that you fought them at least, but yeah, they pushed at a certain percent health, right? And so that you would stop damage and push out of there, and it didn't matter whether you did it like 90% as good as you could or 100%, right? As long as you met that threshold. The only thing that changed was like how many battle reses are we going to have in P2?
But then you had a P2 that largely.
That's true.
Boss damage was less. I don't want to say it was irrelevant, but it was substantially less relevant than. Anything else.
And that's not to say that Jailer doesn't have percent health pushes, because he does, but they're just not realistically attainable in
It's like 20% or something, isn't it?
I think P1, I think it's 60%.
Yeah, 60.
P2, it's 30.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, 30. Yeah.
You can't reasonably get there if you're progressing on it, at least not now.
If you're making those pushes, you have enough damage to kill that boss very quickly.
You have 30 players in your regular summon shop.
You must not have a windwalker.
You got to take lust off of pull if you're making that P2 push. That's all I got to say if you're out there and you encounter that. All right, a couple other bits on our list here that we didn't get to, so we could talk about those. And I think the one thing we haven't really covered too much was the reduced schedule that the guild runs, and I don't know, just everything surrounding that, the pros and cons of it being that way, and how it changes what it's like to raid there. So I don't know, whatever about that is relevant or interesting. I'm curious about how it feels for you.
Cheryl, what do you think about the 9-hour schedule?
I love it. This is like I applied to the guild a couple of years ago, almost I think now, and I was looking at like a very, very low hour guild that performed really well, and this is exactly what I wanted. I'm really happy about it. I know lots of people on the roster are like itching to raid all the time. Same with me most of the time, honestly. Like an hour before raid, I'm like, okay, I just want to fight the boss now, you know. But some people are to the point where they're like, let's add a day, and I don't think we're ever going to do that. But it's cool that everyone wants to play that badly, and that means we're going to perform well.
Yeah. We have some unbelievably talented players on our roster that could, if they wanted to, go to any guild that they want, which is awesome. And I think Charles is exactly right. Like, I think we take a lot of pride in doing as well as we do on the limited schedule. You know, some people make the jokes that we're like the retirement home. We're just the group of owners that like just don't like to raid very much. But you know, it's a question that, you know, comes up every once in a while, especially when we're, you know, knocking on the door of Hall of Fame on like the Monday before it closes. Like, if we raided 1 or 2 extra days this year, we could have just gotten it safely. You know, we didn't have to go through all of this drama and wait till the last minute. But I mentioned earlier in the show, like, the way that we measure our performance is how well we perform every tier and how we improve as a guild, and focusing on the things that we can control. And there's still a lot of optimization that we can do in just 9 hours. And I think that's what drives at least like the leadership. I know some raiders would probably prefer to raid more, of just like, how far can we push this? How much can we optimize inside of the 9 hours? And even this tier, when we perform the best we ever have, there are some still like pretty major improvements that I think we can make in the future, which is pretty exciting.
I know that for my guild specifically too, like we definitely have the same like competitive itch to get into the raid, but then we start focusing that like for Mythic Plus, making sure that everybody's getting their 3K score, making sure that everybody has their KSM to be able to upgrade gear with Valor, and doing those things that you can, like things that you can do to contribute inside the raid that are also like necessities to do outside the raid. And it's just like you have to fine tune that competitive energy. And like, sure, you could raid another day, and I think for both of our guilds, there are definitely people who are like itching to get back in the raid and raid more and stuff like that. But like, if you just take that and you continue to like make sure you're doing your Mythic Plus, making sure that you're doing the extracurriculars that are also required for raiding, that is also helpful once raid time does come around.
You guys raid Thursday and Sunday, right? Usually.
We raid 4 days a week, but we're 3 hours a night.
Yeah. So that I will say is one of the more annoying things in the specific 3 nights that we chose, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
So
true.
we start the week Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we have to wait what seems like forever while we're watching all these Thursday night guilds, Sunday night guilds, like progress on bosses, and we just want to get in there and kill it. We got to wait all the way till Monday to get back in there. And then we just pound it out like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then another kind of prolonged break. We make a lot of improvements in between Wednesday and Monday, which I think is where we make the most leaps and bounds. But it is pretty annoying just watching guilds kill the bosses that we want to be killing, and all we can do is sit and wait.
No, I mean, Thursday, Sunday is nice because you get a break.
Totally.
You get like a decent break. You raid on Sunday, and then you get Monday off, and then you do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you're like, I'm pretty chilling with this.
Why not just raid Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday? I don't understand.
I'm down. Dude, I'm a degenerate. I'll raid every day. It doesn't really matter at this point.
I will say it is much better to be in a guild where people want to raid more is the predominant like vibe than being in a guild where people want to raid less is the predominant vibe, because whenever that's like the mood, that's pain.
You got a problem if you just try to raid less.
If people want to raid more, and like if some people are happy and some people want to raid more, that's fine. But if it's the other way, it's like,
even if it's just a couple of people that want to raid less, and you feel like you're almost like holding them hostage in the raid. I witnessed that a couple of times in the last couple tiers, and it's definitely sad to see. There is something to be said though, like what if you just added 15 minutes to the end of every night? And you rated 3 hours and 15 minutes, that adds up to like
an extra
over the
hour.
course of an 8-week tier. Yeah, it's like an extra almost
minutes.
hour per week over an 8-week tier. That's like an extra 2 nights.
On God, one of the craziest things ever is whenever I went from 4 hours a night to 3 hours a night, I felt like I just played infinitely better. There was something about the fatigue of raiding 4 hours a night. I was raiding like 16 hours a week for like forever. There was something about the fatigue of raiding 4 hours a night that just was really tough. And then whenever I swapped down to 3, I was like, oh my goodness. I just noticed my performance was a lot better, and I was mentally more aware. Because I always felt like I had this, like the last hour of the raid, it was like a coin flip whether or not I could be present for like the full thing or not, just mentally.
That's always 12-hour guilds are
good.
3 nights a week, 4 hours a night, but you guys are 4 nights, 3 hours.
Yeah,
that's good. I like that.
I think that is better. Honestly, like maybe this is because I'm almost 30, but I have to like schedule my coffee for the beginning of raid, and I play way better for the first like 2.5 hours of raid, and then the last 30 minutes I'm definitely like on the way down. So I'm glad we don't go too much longer than that.
Yo, Dad, does your new house come with a coffee machine in it?
I have a Keurig, of course.
Okay,
see, retirement home. I told you.
I will say, I for me, it's like we go from 4 on progression to 3 on farm, and during the 3, it's like it's so weird to have a break in the middle of a 3-hour raid, because like a break after 2 feels so natural, but after like 1.5 is like, we just got here. Why are we taking a break? This break is such a high percentage of our raid night.
The break is weird. I could slam 3 without a break personally. I know that there are some people who can't. Like it's an individual by individual basis as to like what works for them.
I will say as well, that's always one of the things whenever people talk about like how good somebody is, especially when in the context of like, why doesn't Thatcher Yes go for world first, right? Why doesn't this person go and play in Liquid or Echo, right? I'm always thinking like, okay, you know, they're playing good for 3 hours a night, right? Or they're playing good for 4 hours a night, right? But like playing good for 16 hours a day is a very different beast than that, as evidenced by the fact that we play worse on hour 4 than we do on hour 0, right? So always something to keep in mind when, like, it's a different axis of skill that exists out there as well.
Back when I practiced for MDI a couple years ago, I would play for like 12, 14 hours and got a small taste of the race world first lifestyle. That shit destroyed me, like mentally and physically. Like it was so difficult just to do that like on weekends only.
Bro, I watch Automatic Jack slam a 12-hour stream where he's doing keys the whole time, and I sit there and I'm like, I gotta go take a nap after like 6.
Yeah, I mean, we've been podcasting for an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm already, it's bedtime soon. All right, speaking of which, let's go get to the Q&A section. But first, we have to thank our supporters over on the Patreon. They are Paul, Bow to Nyx, BFF of Dragons, Khaleesi of the Great Veiled Sea, the Unholy, Breaker of CCs, Queen of the And Go Agains, like that, and the Raiders and the First Patch, Protector of the Azeroth Kingdoms. That's a nice name.
That one name.
That is one name.
That is,
most of the rest of them are not that long.
If a Kyrian Prop Paladin and a Survival Hunter end up in the same group, does that make it Team America? So, okay, you're going to have to explain the Survival Hunter. I guess the Eagle and the
it's because they have an eagle.
Is that it? Or I don't know why.
I don't get it.
Ja?
Sorry.
Dranos' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Never Nude, Chewy. Well emotionally made idioms, so soothing, they release endearing loving light, or we miss Trell. That was when Trell was gone last week. ZivXX, Salting Senny, Necris, Sinmora, Tankdill, Nevuk, Brad-Ceratops, Eevee, Survival Main, No Trick, I forgot I was sub-tier, Dymat, Lufer, Rework Mistweaver, congrats to Liberty and Allegiance of US Proudmore on server first Mythic Anduin, keep it up, congrats. Nyx, Delete Gaming, Gallic, Brusif, Dratnos Routes Abyss, No, Trell Routes Abyss, Msanity, Xena, Rogue is now good enough for Frogs, still bad enough to be sat for SLG, Bless Up, Red Color, YouTube.com/Workbringer, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, Number 1 Simski for Trelsky, Lurka got his golden rabbit out of mists, now he won't stop talking about being a magician, remind him that mages don't cast Chain Lightning, I got flamed for not interrupting an Arathi Basin Comp Stomp, Milk, Benil, aka YOLO Swag Crew, Sife, Pone, Windwalker Monk Steel with nerfs by rolling with the punches, Duda Sims with 4-piece, Skelly will be going back to Elemental from Enhance, Dosegni making more Vamp kids than Twilight, and give Trell the first mount. Trell, did you get the first mount?
I actually did.
Oh my god.
What the?
So lucky.
How much did you pay?
I didn't. They gave me the mount for some reason.
Wait, they gave it to you?
Wait, they traded to you?
Yeah.
We award our first 2 mounts of every tier 2 raiders that we classify as like distinguished players of the tier that kind of go above and beyond. And then after that, we kind of have a bucket of people and just give them out from there. But the first 2 go to 2 distinguished players, and Cheryl was one of them.
Oh my god.
Corey and I trashed Windwalker Monk pretty much at every single lunch that we were at.
I mean, I did too. I was like, I don't know why they want me on the boss. I don't do damage.
Yep.
Well, you're a distinguished raider, that's why. Bring the player, not the class.
Distinguishedly handsome.
So true. All right, let's do Q&A before Trell leaves. All right, the first one, this is a long question. I'm just going to summarize it, but I'll put the full text up for anybody that wants to read on the video or the stream. Basically, it's a question about the person is from a 2-day cutting edge guild, and they don't like how they don't get to kill the same bosses that World First and higher Hall of Fames get to do on Mythic, but they're not suggesting never nerfing the bosses. They're instead suggesting kind of the opposite and not having delivered the original version of the bosses at all, lowering the entire bar of Mythic rating, and then being very light on any tuning after that, which does mean that the World First and Hall of Fame guilds that raid 4 or 5 days a week are going to blow through it, but who cares? Does a raid have to be tuned for only a small handful of guilds to be cleared, to be considered good for fun? I would make the argument the raid should have never been tuned with them in mind in the first place. And yeah, that's
I think it's
the question. In summary, is Mythic raiding too hard?
I think not, and I actually think that the general nerfs to the bosses are... I don't know how often I see a nerf where I'm like, that's not in line with what I expected. And I don't know what it is. I think that Blizzard's pretty on the pulse normally with the timing of their nerfs to bosses as well, because I never feel like something is getting nerfed at the wrong time. I guess Kill Jaden was like the only exception for me where I felt like that boss got absolutely slam dunked. But I don't know. It's one of those things that like I feel like the nerf progression is generally pretty solid.
I hate this take with a fiery passion. I'm
Well, I
like
disagree, but it's because I'm elitist, right?
well, I don't think it like okay. So the argument here is basically like they should just release pre-nerf Halandris and pre-nerf Anduin and pre-nerf Rygalon and pre-nerf Jailer so that this guild, but this guild's a 2-day cutting edge guild.
No,
Are they even reaching those bosses when they
no,
are?
You're missing the point.
Right, but like, okay, so what is going to be the difference in terms of this person's bosses that they pull compared to a world where the bosses are nerfed later for when they reach them versus just having never been hard at all in the first place?
They're saying to implement the post nerf of those
Right,
bosses.
that's what I'm saying. So for this guild, their experience is going to be identical in these two universes, except for the fact that they're going to feel like they missed out on a hard boss that somebody else got to experience, right? So they want to take that experience away from me of fighting these really hard and fun bosses that I live for, so that they don't have to feel bad that they didn't get to do that. But they don't actually want to fight those versions of the bosses. They literally just don't want to know that I got to. So I hate this.
Troll, what were you gonna say?
Well, I think this is definitely coming from, I'm assuming they got to Halandris right after it got destroyed from Blizzard's tuning. Like Halandris was a really, really tough boss, with the really short bomb timer, and they were probably preparing out the ass for it. But then they get there, and all of a sudden you can leave a bomb on the ground for 30 seconds and not worry about it for like, you can do like a third of the bomb handling as before. So I can get it from their side, but also, you do want the other guilds to be able to play the hard boss as well. So I don't know if they should just try to nerf them a little bit later if it's a really hard tier like it was this tier, or what. It's hard to say what would work for everyone.
I was surprised Halandris lived as long as it did before that big nerf. Yeah.
That boss was really, really tough. What were you saying, Treefee? Sorry.
You're good.
I was going to say, I think I'm somewhere in between Dratnos and Settles maybe here.
I agree with Dratnos.
Oh, this is a nice sandwich we've got going here.
Okay. I think the general pacing of their nerfs, I think, allows each tier of guilds as you go down the world ranks to encounter the boss in like a difficulty that suits that guild's schedule. If a 2-day guild encounters the Halandris that we did, like they wouldn't have to extend for a week. They might have to extend for like 3 weeks, and then nobody would want to raid in that guild anymore. So I think like as you go down the world ranks, I think Blizzard has done a pretty good job with the pacing of their nerfs. So even though the fights are nowhere near the Race to World First or the World Top 50 level, it kind of makes sense for those guilds' schedules and skill level sometimes. And also, I kind of disagree a little bit with the take at the end of the fact that heroic is like laughably easy.
Right, I didn't read that part out, but yeah.
Heroic has been noticeably more difficult.
Yeah, for
at
sure.
At least in the first month.
Oh my god, heroic.
That I think in the world 400 to 500 range, like you can really like up your game, learning things about how to improve your raids, approach to fights on those heroic encounters. Because Anduin through Jailer were pretty much no joke on heroic. Jailer, like whatever, but I think they've been doing a better job of making heroic tougher these last couple tiers.
I think that's something that's important to remember too, is just because like you don't kill these bosses on like pre-nerf and stuff like that, it doesn't make you like not a mythic guild or not a cutting edge guild too. There are obviously varying levels of like competitiveness with these, and like killing bosses pre-nerf is kind of cool. But at the same point, it doesn't diminish the fact that you killed that boss on mythic. That is a hard ass boss to kill.
This is exactly where we started. Like when I joined Nascent, we were world 500 something, I think, maybe 600. Jeez. So, and we've had the same schedule the entire time. So 9 hours, you're able to do a lot in 9 hours, no matter where you start. So I think it's about finding, an atmosphere that you really like, people that you really like, and just trying to collectively improve. Because like 2-night guilds, like you can do something similar. You can improve leaps and bounds.
Yeah. I will say, yeah, I definitely agree with Tuttles that like anybody trying to diminish an accomplishment because it was pre-nerf, you know,
Being an asshole.
except for when I do that to Tuttles is never acceptable. Yeah,
It's a jest. Anyways, like yeah, like for the record, I do also agree with Dratnos. I was just trying to explain the alternative position a little bit better here.
I will say as well that the nerf, the element of like if you're progressing a boss and then it gets nerfed as well, that can be something that does feel bad. I do understand that, but for me personally, that's given me a lot of fuel to improve. Has been like, man, if we were just, you know, a little bit better, we could have killed this boss pre-nerf, right? And it's like you come in, it's like, this feels bad, but then next tier you come in stronger for it. So,
or pre-Hall of Fame and post-Hall of Fame.
Right.
Do we need to pull up the clip of you introducing yourself as the famed famed?
Dude,
we watched that the other day.
Famed Bane of the Banshee Queens. This is Trell, breaker of chains. Settles.
Did you guys watch that in your guild? We watched that at ours.
Yeah, we did.
I saw that live and I was like, I'm saving this and I am going to never forget it.
Yeah, I am a bit of a dick, huh? All right, next question comes from What's Wrong with WoW, who asks, how many hours of prep outside of raid do both the officers and or the individual raiders put in? And do you ever think reducing that amount to play for another night would ever be a good trade-off for your guild? So we actually have talked a lot about this at the start of the episode, but I think putting some actual numbers on it and that second question of like, what is the best ratio, assuming you had a fixed amount of time, are I think somewhat interesting ones. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think like we mentioned, you kind of need buy-in from everybody if you are going to change the schedule in any way. If you're going to move at the 9 hours to different nights, if you're going to add hours, if you're going to add nights, I think it's super important that you pretty much need unanimous approval for this. Otherwise, you're just going to be dragging people along that don't want to be there. In terms of would it be a good trade-off for me? No, definitely not. I'm going to find a way to put a degenerate amount of hours into preparation, regardless of how much we raid, because I'm just a psycho and I don't care about my own mental or physical health during progression. So like I'm always going to do that. I think our individual raiders and the other officers, they also put a ton of work into kind of understanding and iterating on the how we do things. I usually come with the what and the why, and then they like are very good at iterating our strategy, our high level strategy into like how we do certain things. So it's an interesting question. I think there has to be some kind of balance. Like I mentioned, I think the 15 minutes at the end of every single raid, I thought about that because of this question when I read it a couple of days ago. So that's like a potential compromise, but those are kind of my high level thoughts.
I think that whenever I was an officer in Might, like I would spend, we would probably spend like 10 to 15 hours a week just doing like strategy stuff, officer meetings, stuff like that, to make sure that everything was, whether it be prepping for the boss that we're currently on or prepping for the bosses in the future, we would spend an infinite time. And then like as the tier drew on, we would spend less and less time doing officer meetings and stuff like that. Like I'm sure at 250 pulls in a jailer, there weren't any officer meetings. There didn't need to be. As a raider this tier, I spent maybe probably like 45 minutes to an hour every single raid night, like before the raid. Probably like 30 most nights, because like we would have like a post that's going over the strategy stuff that we're changing for that day. I would have to look and see if any of my assignments changed. And then like if I was really unsure about some things, I would call Dratnos' guild's Moonkun and have an emergency meeting and have to talk through a couple of things about my jailer positioning. But like there is, I would say like 3 or 4 hours a week I would spend just in prep for the boss specifically. And this is just strategy preparation. That does not include Mythic Plus or Reputation or whatever the hell else I have to do.
Right. And that's the thing of like not maintaining a character on my roster, on our roster. I don't have to worry about any of that. Like I don't have to farm. I don't have to get my boxes. I don't have to do anything. I can spend, especially in the first couple of weeks of the tier, to kind of understand how the bosses are actually looking from PTR testing to live. I can spend all of my time doing that while Trell is carrying people through M+ with all of his tanks.
All right, final question is actually I think an interesting one about something we didn't really talk about too much, which is this one's from Dagger D, who says, I'm fascinated by the guild supporting two different raid teams. How do they coexist without one team becoming dominant, poaching off the other? What are some of the benefits of doing it with two teams in the same guild? And what are some of the struggles that are unique to it as well? So, yeah, because I mean, it's just a very interesting dynamic, right? Most guilds, the overwhelming majority are just one team. How does it work for you?
Yeah, for sure. I guess the easiest way to answer this is like Nascent is very much a community that happens to have two completely independent raiding teams. So Team 9 is us. We raid 9 hours a week. And Team 8 is our other team. They raid 8 hours a week. They're a 2-night guild. And I think Dobie, who runs the Nascent Twitter, answered this pretty well on the actual like tweet thread itself. The teams don't cross over hardly at all, because I think when you're a guild that fields two teams, it can be easy to have like a main team and then like a B team, you know, and the best players from the B team go to the main team. And then the worst performers from the A team like drop down to the B team. We think that's kind of like a toxic environment that we did not have any interest in doing. So it has happened a couple of times. More often than not, it's like folks who want to step back from raiding on Team 9 might take a break for a while and come back and raid for Team 8. More casual schedule, not quite as intense. But we try and avoid that at all costs. And both teams have completely different leadership, completely different officers, and all of that.
Would Team 8 not have recruiting issues? I feel like Team 8 would have like. If I was a part of Team 8, I feel like I would have animosity towards Team 9 that their rank is being shown instead of ours, and I feel like it would be hard for them to recruit. Would it?
What
not?
do you mean? You get free interest. People click on the guild, you know, and then they're like, oh, there's a different team here as well, you know?
Yeah. But you don't. They're not the team that's being shown there. I think is the thing that I would be worried about specifically.
Yeah, that's a good question. Any teammaters in the chat want to chime in? No, I think. They do run into some recruitment challenges, I think, just like we do sometimes. It's kind of hard to find people who fit exactly your vision or level of progression sometimes. I think the player pool for where they're at, I think they're like world 300 to 400 at the moment, is pretty huge. And you have a lot of people who are really good at the game and just starting to get into cutting edge type rating, really passionate about it. Interested in a team like that who, similar to where we were a few years ago, they're improving every single tier because they get a lot of support and advice from Team 9, our individual raiders. When Team 8 has questions about the bosses that they're on, they just come to the Team 9 raiders and they're like, how did you guys do it? So there's a pretty direct line of communication when we're fielding two teams in that guild. So I think a lot of players are interested in being a part of that overall Nascent environment, regardless of what team.
Cool. It's just a question. Like, I've never experienced something like that. I never knew.
All right, before we go, I want to quickly talk about leveling speedrunning, which is another specialty of yours. We have of the U.S. world first 60 people, or guys, U.S. first, world first in the U.S. You were 9th by this website, where at least the first person, there's some kind of bug, so maybe 8th to level 60. How much of the game for you is speed leveling characters? Is there any fun anecdotes you have about that you'd love to share with us as well?
Yeah, I don't know. We're about to lose like half the Twitch viewers, I'm sure, talking about leveling like this. But if there are two very specific things that I love about WoW, it is raiding and leveling. I have no idea why, but I think it's something about the amount of focus that it requires to do something at like a really high level. I love like getting better at that kind of stuff, like maintaining a level of focus as if you're pulling a 10-minute raid boss for 5 hours straight on leveling is like a challenge that I just am obsessed with, and how I can kind of optimize that. So usually I'm very fortunate that I usually, as well as a lot of other people on our raid team, get access to the beta of new expansions. And so I think in the Shadowlands beta, I leveled a hunter, like, I don't know, I did about 18 individual leveling runs from 50 to 60. And in particular, I would like go through like very specific sections. Like I would do Bastion speedruns, and I would do Arden Weald speedruns, and I would do all of the different zones to try and get it as quick as possible. I think my best run was just under 5 hours. It was like 4 hours and 58 minutes from 50 to 60. And on live, you can see on the website, it's 8:03, and that was 5 hours and 3 minutes.
Solid. Yeah, I would get on PTR a lot to do Mythic Plus stuff, and every single time I logged in, Treefee was like on a hunter number 7 or number 9, doing a speed run, which is awesome.
Treefee 12.
Yeah, so I love just like finding every single advantage that I possibly can, all of the unique items that you can use, all the different strategies, kind of calculating how much experience you're getting from side quests versus how long it takes you to do it to still stay ahead of the pack. Because I'm running war mode, obviously, which is a risk.
Obviously, of course.
Yeah.
You gotta get that bonus XP.
10% experience. Yeah. And so, I'm running the risk of getting ganked, and every time you get ganked is like, you're just going to get camped. So you have to stay ahead of the pack, but also optimize the amount of experience you're getting in the side quests if somebody's just doing the main storyline. So I love those kinds of optimizations. So yeah, I'm a psycho.
Legend has it that Treefee has 300 gun shoes still in his bag to this day.
Yep.
I'm sure he actually does.
I was so mad when they made him not work in the maw anymore. I had the precise moment I would use gun shoes every time they took it away. I was like, are you kidding me, man? But I enlisted help from, a couple of warlocks, like on launch, when you're dragging really slowly the chips of the dominated helm, putting it in the center. You could use warlock gates. You couldn't use any other abilities, but you could grab a shard, take a gate, and put it in. And then you could have somebody else in your group grab a shard, jump, and goblin glider. And that very minute second that you're glidering gets you the distance that you need in order to plug it into the middle. So there's just some pretty degenerate shit that you can do. If it saves you 5 seconds every single time, that adds up to minutes and hours.
Huh. Well, I can say I do love speedrunning. I love hearing about that kind of stuff, but hearing it applied to World of Warcraft leveling is always always sort of breaks my brain, but I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I have the world's first Torghast Layer 8, patch 9.0.
There you go.
Mortragar.
Okay, dude.
Speedrun.
All right. Before we go, is there any social media or any shout-outs you want to deliver? Any place? I don't know if you create any content yourself or the guild, anything like that you'd like people to follow or anything like that?
Yeah. First of all, shout out to you guys. It was awesome hanging out and chatting. I appreciate the invite. I was joking to Trell earlier this week. I gotta be the least famous person you've ever brought onto this podcast. So
I'm here every week. What are you talking about?
I mean, when your last few guests were like Corey May, Cubsy, and like Narcles, like I don't know.
Bastu, yeah.
It's cool. I've been a fan of this pod for a long time. You guys do some good stuff over here. But shout out to the guildies in the chat that came to support me and Trell in the pod today. You can find us at nascent.gg. You can see what Team 9 is recruiting for. You can see what Team 8 is recruiting for. We post news posts. We post kill videos and stuff. And also follow our Twitter. That's run by Dobie. He posts general thoughts on, announcements, how the team is doing, posts our kill videos and everything there. So shoot us a follow. That's all I got.
Is that thing at the top on their banner Gul'dan on their website?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got to update that. Gul'dan's been a long time.
Nope, that's a great fight. That is a premium choice.
It's cool though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is cool, yeah. It's a good looking raid instance too, Nighthold was.
Mm-hmm. Miss it. All right, that's going to be all for us this week. We'll be back next week probably with another one. Later, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Goodbye.
Later.